Alright everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Surrounded by Bourbon. My name is Phil Crawford, aka Cosplay Whiskey. This is episode 10, and this is my continued exploration of American spirits, although we will throw in some Irish and Scotch, because I'm sure you can see behind me that I have a few bottles of that too. But this is episode 10. We are today looking at Buffalo Trace. Now, we have had some of the stablemates of Buffalo Trace on here. The McAfee's Benchmark, which was not a terribly successful bourbon in my opinion. So let's see if we can have something a little more high scoring today with Buffalo Trace. I mean, I'm probably going to spoil the entire review now by saying that I'm not new to Buffalo Trace. It was a whiskey that I bought on a fairly regular occurrence back home in Ireland. The main difference is that the American version is bottled at 45% ABV or 90 proof. The UK and Ireland version is typically bottled at 40% ABV and 80 proof. And yet, even at that lower proof on ABV, I would go so far as to say that even up against some of Ireland and Scotland's best, the Buffalo Trace was one of the best value whiskies that you could get. And this back home you can buy hard liquor or whiskey and other spirits in your local supermarket, and so you would typically find these on the shelves of places like Sainsbury's or Tesco, often for as little as £19, so maybe like $23, $24, especially if it was on offer. And so really, for that kind of money and for the quality of the liquid that you were getting, this was really hard to beat. So I guess I probably shot myself in the foot with this review. You probably kind of know where we're going to go in territory wise here, but anyway, let's progress on, because now I get to try the American 45% full fat version. So let's go into a little bit of history, and then I'll go into the tasting notes and what I think about this whiskey. So the Buffalo Trace distillery has had a few name changes over its history, over its 200-year history. It's been called the Old-Fashioned Copper Distillery. It was known as the George T. Stagg Distillery, and then in 1999 its owners, the Sazerac Company Incorporated, decided to change the name to the Buffalo Trace Distillery. And that name comes from the path that would be created by buffalo as they walked through the American wilderness. And one of those paths actually led up to the Kentucky River, just pretty close to where the distillery is actually located. And so Buffalo Trace as a whiskey was introduced in August 1999, not long after the name change of the distillery. And it was created, apparently, according to Sazerac officials, it was created by former master distiller Elmer T. Lee. And it uses their #1 mash bill, which we don't really know much about, other than the fact that it contains 10% rye or less. So we don't know how much corn, we don't know how much malted barley is in there, but this would not be considered a high rye. The barrels that they choose whenever they come to vat this come from the middle floors of the rick house, so kind of more of the balanced, I guess, from the changing seasons and the temperatures that can change rapidly in Kentucky. And the whiskey itself is aged at least between 8 to 10 years. So even though it doesn't have an age statement on it, it very well could. And in terms of bourbon, this is kind of old whiskey, I guess. It's not until you start getting into the older stablemates of like Pappy Van Winkle that you start seeing 15, 20 and 23 year age statements. So like really, you know, well aged liquid that's inside this. And as I say, this is bottled at 90% proof. And this cost me $31 from Total Wine here in Florida. And it's kind of good to see this coming back on the shelves down here in South Florida. Whenever I first moved here in 2024, I was kind of amazed that you could not find a bottle of this anywhere. And if you did, people were charging like $60 to $100 a bottle, which I knew it definitely was not worth it at that price. And I kind of found it hard to reconcile, considering I knew how cheap it was or how good value it was back home. So yeah, good to see that this is starting to become more available, and maybe that is just also an indication of where the bourbon market is right now. That, you know, there's lots of maturing spirit, and these things are maybe becoming less tradable than they were, just because of the economic circumstances we find ourselves in today. Anyway, let's get on with the nosing and the tasting, and then I'll give you my overall thoughts and the score. So, nose-wise, so this is like a really lovely nose to this. We're getting vanilla frosting, there's caramel, there's brown sugar. It's also very fruity. So we're getting orange peel, we're getting cherries, there's actually some peach in there as well. There's cinnamon and nutmeg, a bit of pepper. Don't take this the wrong way, but there's also a bit of shoe polish. I actually love the smell of shoe polish, so I think that's kind of a great note to have in here. Alongside that, toasted oak, and there's even some like sweetened black coffee in there as well. So, you know, there's kind of a lot going on in this. It's a really engaging nose. I would happily nose this for quite a while tonight, but you know, I'm not going to keep you all night, so let's go on to the palate. So even at 40% back home, this was never a thin whiskey. But with that extra proof, the mouthfeel is definitely a little richer, a little oilier. Packs a bit more of a punch, definitely. And the spices definitely come through quite well. It is definitely well balanced. I'll give you some of the more individual notes after this next sip, so bear with me. So we have caramel sauce, we have vanilla cream, there's corn syrup in there, there's cherries, some apple pie as well, and then there's a touch of rye spice mixed in with kind of quite distinct oak, but you get like some cinnamon hots, there's clove, even a bit of like green chili pepper, fresh green chili pepper. And there's also like an orange bitters kind of note. So what I like about this is it's kind of savory, it's not overly sweet, but everything marries really well together. Compared to like the Maker's Mark of the last review, you know, I mean there is sweetness in this, but it's not as sweet as say that Maker's Mark. So yeah, very nice whiskey indeed. We'll get into the finish. So we're kind of on the cusp of medium here. Stuff it, why not? We're going to say it's a medium finish. All right, medium length. Very pronounced baking spices. There's that orange note again. The cherries are there as well. And then like warm caramel waffles. Yeah. It's just good stuff, guys. I'm just gonna say. So, what do I think about Buffalo Trace? So, we've kind of left the budget range now. This is $31 it cost me in total wine. So, you know, we're not far out of the budget, under $25 territory, but this is a really, really, really strong bourbon whiskey. It is fantastic bourbon for the money. In fact, you can scratch that. It's just fantastic bourbon, full stop. This is a whiskey that every American bourbon lover should have. And even for those of you who maybe have not taken a foray into the world of bourbon, this, for the money, is one that you should definitely explore. Whether it's the 40% ABV or if you can get your hands on the 45%, it's a must-have as far as I'm concerned. This is definitely a step up compared to the 40% version that we get back home in the UK and Ireland. I'm glad to see it on the shelves on a regular basis now, although I'm glad to see that the shops are also putting a one bottle per customer kind of barrier to owning this whiskey. So it just means that there's more to go around for everybody else to get to try this and to have it on their shelves once more. So I am going to score this a 7 out of 10. This is something that you would be more than happy to share with, you know, people who have come around to your house. It's an engaging whiskey, there's a lot going on, and I recommend this one very highly. And I'm glad that I've got to a point in the bourbon journey so early on that I can have something that I recommend very highly. Now, Buffalo Trace Distillery makes an awful lot of brands. I have a couple of the older stablemates here. I have the Eagle Rare 10, which also uses mash bill number 1. I have the Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch, which also uses mash bill number 1. So I will be interested just to see if they can live up to the standard Buffalo Trace here. But yeah, massive step up over the McAfee's, which I know is very much a budget whiskey, but this is definitely a whiskey to own. And I am so glad that you've stuck with me through the journey so far. I would appreciate if you would leave comments, hit the like button, also subscribe, and I look forward to having another review out for you in a week's time. And until then, have a great day, great night, great evening, whatever you're doing, and I will see you again. Sláinte.